Hello, I'm Patricia, 32 years old. My early life was marked by the loss of my mother, a wound that deepened my connection with my father, who single-handedly provided for all my needs. This profound loss made me cautious about opening up emotionally, and for a long time, I thought I might remain single, but then I met Peter, a kind and persistent man who is now 34. We were introduced by a mutual friend who was concerned about my extended period of being single. After a year of gentle courtship, Peter proposed. Now, as we prepare for our upcoming wedding, I remember a distressing incident at our wedding reception. My in-laws, clearly under the influence and oblivious to the murmurs around them, confronted me publicly. They demanded that I prove my financial worth to the family by contributing $55,000 monthly, half my salary, asserting that it was too late for objections since I was already marrying into their family. I was stunned by their audacity, especially at what was meant to be a joyous occasion. As I stood there, my face drained of color, my father intervened. Taking the microphone from them, he sternly reprimanded my in-laws, reminding them of the embarrassment they were causing themselves. This episode not only shocked me but also reinforced the cautious approach I've always taken in relationships. Despite the love and support from my father and Peter, navigating these family dynamics has been a challenge. Peter and I had been dating for a while when I realized how significant he had become in my life. His kindness and attention made me truly happy. I began to envision a future with him, and when he proposed, it was clear we were on the same path. Peter always knew how to ease my doubts, saying things like, "Don't worry if you're uncertain about something, I'll be here for you until you feel better. I love you, Patricia, you can always rely on me." His words and his presence brought a comforting warmth that deepened my affection for him. When I shared the news of our engagement with my dad, his joy was overwhelming. He even shed a few tears. "Wow, Patricia, you're finally tying the knot. I'm over the moon for you," he exclaimed. We shared a light-hearted moment when I teased him for being so dramatic, something I rarely saw in him. "I used to worry that you might never settle down," he confessed. It was a surprise to hear his concerns, but it only showed how deeply he cared. His warm congratulations meant everything, especially knowing the sacrifices he made in raising me alone. As Peter and I began planning our wedding, our lives became a whirlwind of activity. Our work took up most of our weekdays, and weekends were dedicated to organizing the big day. Free time became a luxury. Eventually, we found a day to visit Peter's parents for the first time since our engagement. Despite our busy schedules, we were eager to visit. As we arrived at his parents' house, nerves fluttered in my stomach. Peter noticed and reassured me with a comforting smile. "Don't worry, my parents are really kind," he said, easing my anxiety slightly. When we rang the doorbell, Peter's mother greeted us. "Mom, I'm home," he announced cheerfully. "Welcome home, Peter, it's so nice of you to come," she responded warmly. I followed with a polite introduction. "Nice to meet you, I'm Patricia, Peter's fiancée." Her initial warmth toward Peter cooled somewhat as she turned to me. The smile she offered was polite but lacked the warmth she had shown her son, and her gaze held a hint of scrutiny. This subtle shift left me feeling uneasy. As we stepped inside, Peter's mother led us to the living room, where her reserved demeanor persisted. With a tone more interrogative than conversational, she began, "Patricia, I'm curious about what you bring to the table. Peter is our treasure, our only child. If you're going to marry him, you must be suitable. Are you worthy of him?" Her directness took me by surprise. I hadn't expected such a frosty reception from my future mother-in-law, and I struggled to respond. "Remember, you'll be joining our family. Are you prepared for that?" she continued. While marrying Peter would indeed mean becoming part of his family, the high expectations she placed on me felt unreasonable. Peter's family wasn't prominent or influential, and I wasn't even planning to live with them. I disliked the pressure of her questions, and as I pondered a response, she grew impatient and sharply scolded me. "When I ask you a question, answer promptly. You're being rude." Her voice escalated as she pressed. "I want to know if you're ready for this." Feeling overwhelmed, I managed to reply, "I hope Peter and I will support each other in our marriage." Her response was dismissive. "That's a naive thing to say. Your job as a wife is to support Peter. You clearly don't understand the basics." Peter's father, sitting nearby, intervened. "Honey, please calm down," he said apologetically to me. "I apologize, Patricia. I hope you weren't too upset by my wife's words." "It's okay," I replied, trying to stay composed. I understood that Peter's mother was protective of her son and might have spoken hastily. Just then, Peter's brother entered the room. His gentle tone momentarily eased my nerves until he added, "What my wife says has some truth to it. What concerns me is that you come from a single-parent family." Confused and a bit hurt, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, being raised by just one parent doesn't have a good public image. We can't exactly be thrilled about someone from such a background becoming our son's wife, can we?" he elaborated. At that moment, I couldn't hold back. Wait a minute, what's wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked incredibly hard to raise me alone. I am grateful for my upbringing and proud of my father. Growing up with one parent doesn't diminish my worth. The room fell into a tense silence as I stood my ground, feeling the weight of their judgments but firm in my values. Peter's parents seemed to hold an old-fashioned perspective, questioning my ability to be a good wife because of my upbringing. They doubted whether I had learned essential skills, like managing household chores. I responded with conviction. "I helped my father a lot with household chores. I can also cook pretty well, so please don't make assumptions about me." Despite my clear explanation, they dismissed my words and proceeded to lay down conditions for our marriage. "We'll allow you to marry Peter, but in return, you must promise to prioritize us because we are his parents. Can you promise us that?" they demanded. I was taken aback by their request. It felt less like a blessing and more like a transaction. Later that evening, feeling sidelined by their dominating attitude, I decided to share my concerns with Peter. "Hey Peter, do your parents always talk to people like that?" I asked, hoping for some understanding. Peter seemed unfazed. "What's wrong with how they talk?" I was surprised that Peter didn't recognize the issue. "I mean, the way your parents spoke to me and what they said," I explained further. Peter dismissed it casually. "Oh, really? They were just discussing whether you're ready for marriage." I understand their concern, but I felt like their comments were a bit too much. I persisted. "Peter, your parents seem to think less of me because of my background." Peter's casual response surprised me. "Really? What do you think they said wrong?" "They gave us their blessing, so let's not dwell on it." Though I agreed outwardly, inside I couldn't shake the feeling that Peter seemed to align more with his parents than with me. It was deeply troubling. Sensing my discomfort, Peter tried to reassure me, pulling me into a hug. "Patricia, you don't have to worry so much. My parents are just a bit upset because their only son is getting married," he explained. Though his words were meant to comfort me, they didn't fully alleviate my feelings of being misunderstood and somewhat alone in this new family dynamic. I was left wondering how we would navigate our future together with such different expectations from his parents. Peter tried to ease the tension by suggesting his parents simply wanted what was best for us. "They just want us to have a strong marriage, like theirs, and that's why they might have come off a bit harsh," he said. I tried to see things from his perspective, acknowledging that perhaps they held high expectations for us, but I couldn't shake the discomfort caused by their criticism of my upbringing. "I believe our marriage should be about us, about mutual respect, not about seeking validation from others." As I reflected on this, the wedding day arrived, and walking down the aisle with my father was an incredibly emotional moment. He had raised me alone, and seeing him by my side as I married Peter made the day all the more meaningful. When Peter and I exchanged vows and rings, the applause surrounding us felt like a symbol of the commitment we were making. The reception was filled with joy and congratulations from friends and colleagues, making it a memorable occasion. Despite my earlier reservations about Peter's parents, the warmth of the day left me feeling content with our decision to move forward. After the ceremony, we looked forward to officially registering our marriage. But as we mingled with guests, I noticed that Peter's parents were visibly intoxicated. Their erratic behavior made me uncomfortable. Then, a troubling moment unfolded when Peter's mother, slightly tipsy, pulled me aside and sternly told me, "Listen, Patricia, after this wedding, you are going to dedicate yourself to us. Prepare yourself, we will test you." Some guests laughed, thinking it was a joke, but I could feel the undercurrent of seriousness in her words. Shortly after, Peter's father took the microphone, glanced at me, and said sharply, "Patricia, aren't you ashamed to wear a dress like that? It doesn't suit you." Peter's mother chimed in, "Dear, you should tell her the truth." The room's atmosphere shifted, and whispers began to ripple through the crowd. I turned to Peter, hoping he would step in and address his parents' rude remarks, but to my dismay, he remained silent. Later, he explained that he couldn't intervene and didn't believe his parents had done anything wrong. His response was a punch to my gut. It made me realize the challenges we'd face as a couple, especially when it came to navigating his parents' influence and how we'd handle conflicts together. As the day unfolded, it became clear that this issue was far from resolved. I understood that if Peter couldn't stand up to his parents now, it would only be harder later. The situation escalated further when my in-laws, intoxicated and unabashed, continued to make unreasonable demands. "Well, you're married now, but to truly be part of this family, you need to prove you have enough money," they announced. "After you register your marriage, you should give us a few thousand a month and your entire bonus." Their words stunned me. Such audacity at a wedding reception was beyond comprehension. My face drained of color, and before I could respond, my father stepped in. "Enough of this," he declared, taking the microphone. "Don't you realize how inappropriate this is?" Peter's parents shot back defiantly, "Why are you interrupting us while we're talking?" They sneered further, even going so far as to mock my father's background, calling him unworthy due to his status as a single parent. My anger flared, but my father remained composed. "You're even worse than I thought," he said, his voice unwavering. "Refusing to meet me just because I'm a single father is shameful. I never expected such bigotry from people associated with a respected figure." He continued, "By the way, President Donald, a business partner of mine and an old friend, was also raised by a single mother. Your comments have unintentionally insulted the very president of the company you work for." It was a moment of realization for my in-laws as the weight of their actions dawned on them. My father-in-law's demeanor shifted from confident to pleading as he dropped to his knees. "I apologize, sir. Please don't mention this to the president," he begged. This drastic change in their attitude made it clear just how deeply my father's influence had affected the situation. The rest of the evening unfolded with a mix of tension and disbelief. Some guests laughed awkwardly, others pulled out their phones to capture the spectacle. My father, true to his principles, remained firm. "Apologies can't undo what's been said," he told them. Then, addressing the entire room, I made my decision clear. "Thank you all for the entertainment, but there will be no wedding," I announced. "I'll ensure that all gifts and contributions for this event are returned." With that, I walked out of the hall alongside my father, leaving a stunned crowd behind. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. Many guests expressed their sympathy, admiring the way my father and I stood up to my in-laws. Peter's reputation took a hit, with colleagues viewing him differently after his failure to defend me. Eventually, he felt the weight of the situation and resigned from his position. His father was demoted and transferred to a less prestigious role in a distant office. The ripple effect reached even their extended family, who distanced themselves from Peter's parents after the scandal. In the aftermath, I focused on rebuilding my relationship with my father. Spending more quality time together, we grew closer, and his unwavering support gave me strength. One day, he proposed an unexpected opportunity. "Patricia, have you ever considered taking over the business?" he asked, his eyes hopeful. Surprised, I hesitated. "Are you suggesting?" I trailed off. "Why don't you work toward becoming the president of my company?" he proposed. "I'll do my best," I promised, excitement and nervousness swirling in me. After everything that had happened, I realized that my focus needed to shift to my career. I decided to commit myself to learning all aspects of the business, aiming to prove both to myself and my father that I was capable of becoming a great leader. Now, I'm fully dedicated to my work, and although it's challenging, it's incredibly rewarding. I'm optimistic about the future and the prospect of one day leading the company, free from the complications of a tumultuous relationship and the demands of my former in-laws. Thank you for following my story. If you found meaning in it, please consider subscribing. I look forward to sharing more with you in the future.